Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dirk Krol. I'm the Executive Director of Water Europe, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this fifth and last day of this year's edition of Water Innovation Europe, dedicated to a water smart society for global leadership. Yesterday, we had a number of great sessions, of which the panel session was dedicated to water-oriented living labs as a tool to build an EU water smart future. And I'd like to share some of the key messages of yesterday's sessions with you. Firstly, one of the key messages was that innovation is not limited to technology, but also concerns finance and governance, and that we need equitable innovation for this, and we need political will to make water a global and political priority. Also, we've been discussing, I already mentioned, about the water living labs, and we concluded that they are a key opportunity to address the right way of governance, finance, and technologies. It is a very inclusive and collaborative structure that includes multiple groups of stakeholders, breaks the silos, and delivers results and solutions for targeted problems. Also, the involvement of citizens is key. And in order to do that, we need transparency, information, and incentives. The public and youth are aware that water is not an infinite resource, and it's very important to include them in the management of water by providing real-time transparency on the effectiveness and efficiency of the local water management systems. Last but not least, we said that technologies and tools are available, but the biggest challenges are collaboration, bringing together people, sharing information, and connecting these technologies. This is what we have to work on. Today, we're going to continue uh, first by an opening speech by Hans Goossens, the first Vice President of Water Europe and CEO of the Watergroep, the largest public water company serving in Belgium, serving almost 3.3 million citizens. Then we have a little agenda change compared to what we have on the program. Unfortunately, we heard yesterday that Minister João Pedro Matos Fernandes of Portugal is no longer available, but he has also done us the pleasure to ask his state secretary responsible for the environment, Ms. Ines das Santas Costa, to replace him, and we are looking forward to hear what he has to share with us. Then we continue with the award ceremony. First, the award ceremony for the Water Europe Global Water Award, which will be handed over by Rasha Hassan from the European Junior Water Program. And then we have the ceremony for the Water Europe Honorary Membership 2020-2021, which will be moderated by Water Europe President Thomas Michel. And then, of course, last but not least, we will continue with the panel session on a water smart society for global impact, which will be moderated by the ever-entertaining Water Europe board member, Richard Allen. So with that brief introduction, it's my pleasure to give the word to Hans Goossens, Water Europe first Vice President, and I would say runner-up in 1 year to become the next President of Water Europe. Hans, please take the floor.
Thank you, Dirk, and a very warm and literally warm welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. When I joined the Water Group in January 2017, after 25 years in the fertilizer industry with Yara International, I was attracted by the importance of water and by the threats and opportunities resulting from global water scarcity, and by the magic, as I felt it, of the nexus water, energy, food. During the COVID crisis, I learned the importance of a fourth component in this nexus, health. And I knew Water Europe, when it at that time was still called the Water Supply and Sanitation Technology Program, the WSSTP. I knew Water Europe from my previous employer, but when I joined the Water Group, I was very happy to take on a board position in Water Europe very soon. And now since October, first Vice President. With that new board structure, with five presidents, we bring our members' representation closer to the operational heart of our organization. As a member-based platform, I think it is of vital importance to understand the needs and fulfill the expectations of our members. The new government structure allows us to do this even better than we have done so far. I'm grateful to see how our member base has grown throughout the last years, but there is no reason to get complacent. The challenges for the water sector are big, and so are the opportunities. Our members are eager to find the right partners to turn their knowledge into new insights, to turn their ideas into new technologies, and to get the support of an empowering legal framework in order to build new sustainable business. What Europe wants, and I believe is the forum where all this happens. In my new role, I want to strengthen our association as an engine of innovation and transformation that inspires not only our members, but all our stakeholders to build a water smart European society. When looking ahead, clean water and its access to has never been so key to societal development and welfare building as in this era. Fighting the global COVID pandemic was a true short-term priority, but in the medium and long run, the flourishing of our society very much will depend on how successful we will be in making our water supply climate resilient. Our members can have a big impact on the success rate of this effort and on the speed of implementation. I believe this is where Water Europe truly adds value for our members. Based on the network we are, based on the diversity of knowledge and expertise we bring together, based on the voice we have to mobilize society, we will support you to get things happen. We will develop our organization as a stakeholder-centric organization. Thought leadership is not just enough to make the impact that our members are striving for. We will increase our inclusiveness and unlock even more commitment and creativity. Our strategic innovation and research agenda is our stronghold, inspiring policymakers, researchers, technology developers, water service providers, and water management authorities to join forces in building a sustainable, robust, resilient, and dynamic water smart society for Europe, while strengthening Europe's contribution to global societal challenges and the global water markets. Our collaboration program allows our members to network and collaborate with all players in the ecosystem to address the water challenges and shape successful project consortia. Our advocacy program makes sure that the value of water for our society is reflected in European policies and funding programs, and our market program enables our members to bring their research results and innovative solutions to the market in Europe and beyond. The water sector is very much fragmented, and Water Europe has a truly unique position. We bring together problem owners and solution providers. We make sure knowledge generators can meet technology developers, and we channel citizens' concerns and interests and bring them to policymakers. Relaunching the EU post-COVID with the European Green Deal as a roadmap to transform the EU into a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy makes Water Europe's mission to build a water smart society relevant now more than ever. The motto for the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the EU very promising sounds for a fair, green and digital recovery. So who else better could we invite for a keynote on the theme of today, a water smart EU for global impact, than the Portuguese delegate for environment and climate action. The minister himself had to cancel, but we are very happy to have with us the Portuguese Secretary of State for the Environment, Mrs. Inês dos Santos Costa. Mrs. Inês dos Santos Costa was born in Lisbon in 1979 and graduated in environmental engineering from Instituto Superior Técnico in 2002, completed her Master of Engineering Policy and Technology Management, and holds a doctorate in environmental engineering, both from the Instituto Superior Técnico. Between 2002 and 2010, she developed research work at IM Plus Center for Studies in Innovation, Technology and Development Policies. especially in the areas of corporate sustainability and industrial ecology. Within these areas, she has worked on environmental policies, waste management, eco-parks, and industrial symbiosis. She is the author and co-author of scientific articles, books, and technical documents in the fields of industrial ecology. In 2006, she was a guest researcher at the Center for Industrial Ecology at Yale University in the US. Since 2010, she has worked as a senior consultant at Tree Drivers, Engenheira, Inovação e Ambiente, where she has developed sustainable resource management projects in various sectors, with managing entities of specific waste streams, energy sector, municipal councils, amongst others. She was a partner of the company between 2016 and October 2019. She was aide to the Minister of the Environment and to the Minister of Environment and Energy Transition for the Circular Economy in 2016 and 2018 during the previous government of Prime Minister António Costa. And so since October 2019, she is Secretary of State for the Environment at the Portuguese Ministry for the Environment and Climate Action. May I welcome to the digital floor, Mrs. Inés dos Santos Costa.
Thank you very much, Hans. And good morning, everyone. It is an honor to participate in this event on behalf of the Portuguese Ministry of Environment and Climate Action and of the Portuguese Presidency of the EU Council, thanking in advance the Organization of Water Europe for this opportunity. I would like to first begin by saying that if you can draw a lesson from my intervention, I think it would be the following. To achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, we must reduce the extraction and consumption of raw materials and energy and reconcile our development model with welfare and prosperity for all within the limits of our planet. We need a fair, decarbonized, and circular development model in order to achieve this. This challenge is, I would rather say that it's more than technical, technological, economical, or even political. I think it is a challenge about our values, our personal values, but also in the way in which we value natural resources and systems. For example, for the same person, a bottle of water in the desert is worth much more than a bottle of water on the supermarket shelf. This example seems to illustrate that the conditions, the context that surrounds us impacts directly on the value we attach to a given resource, to a given product or service. And that is precisely why we need to have a circular economy in order to achieve this transformation of the context that is needed. It is not another way of saying recycling. I think that is very much a reduction of the term. And when we talk about it, we talk about reduce, about reuse, about repair, about regeneration, which are essential for reducing emissions. And I think that no one can dispute that. But I believe also that they are actions that will never be a priority until we address the necessary changes in the social and in the economic architecture, the context, that needs to be transformed efficiently, effectively, and sufficiently in order to manage the resources over the long term, both the material and the ecological resources, in order to reduce waste, to reduce pollution, to reduce the degradation of ecosystem services, promoting a regeneration and a fair distribution. This is the change to which these principles contribute. Designing products, business models for zero pollution, for zero waste, throughout the life cycle, keeping products and materials in use, and actively regenerating natural systems. I think it is sincerely our responsibility as leaders to design the public policy instruments that point to clear objectives in order to achieve this, that address what we don't want or what we don't need, what we have to avoid, fossil fuel subsidies, pollution, waste production, biodiversity loss, and design policy instruments that encourage what we do want: jobs, environmental essential services, biodiversity. And in order to achieve that, also we have to make room for innovative solutions based on technologies that bring new ways of designing, of producing, of consuming, of managing, and above all, new ways of thinking to meet these goals. In 2017, the Portuguese government was among the first to approve a circular economy action plan in which water plays a particular important part in the field of mainly on the issue of bioeconomy, for example. We had several transversal actions at national, regional, and sectoral level, most of which are still on the ground working. Yesterday, for example, the island of Madeira presented their regional agenda for circular economy as well. So the work is still ongoing. We have directed the Portuguese Environmental Fund to promote these agendas and to foster these new businesses on the ground, assisting municipalities, assisting communities, local communities into implementing these ideas, also working on the circularity of the water nexus. And I think that is very much a successful project. We have covered a lot in a very short time, but if there is one thing that we have learned in the governing area of the environment is that the goal, it's always running ahead of us, and time usually proves us right. As far as water is concerned, it is perhaps, I think everyone agrees, one of the most circular resources we have on Earth. It transforms itself again and again in cycles, continually regenerating itself in different forms. All the water that was and ever will be exists in some state or form within our planet, which is in itself a daunting idea. It is a fundamental part of our social well-being, but the fact is its overuse and pollution also imposes an ecological ceiling, a ceiling that threatens our very survival. We can survive without food for a week, but we cannot survive without water for more than 3 days. So as much as any other finite and degradable environmental service and resource whose demand is increasing, whose supply is uneven, it is imperative that we think about water, its use, its management under a circular economy model, from its territorial and transboundary management to its use in industry and in our very homes. According to the United Nations, water use has been growing at a faster rate than the world population itself. So currently we use about 30% of the total of accessible water, but in less than 10 years, the models point to a percentage that could reach 70%. By 2025, 1.8 billion people will live in areas affected by water scarcity, 2/3 of the world's population living in water scarce regions. And to make the challenge even bigger, most of the utilities infrastructure in most developed countries is aging, and most of it has not kept up with the developments that are required. So we need to tackle these challenges with another view in our perspective. If we apply those circularity principles to water, we can intervene in its management as a product, as a service, as a water resource and ecosystem, as a utility, and as energy. For example, if you want to design for zero waste, it is important to invest in technologies that completely eliminate the need for water. For example, there are very much a lot of innovations in the textiles industry to eliminate the use of water, for instance, in textile washing and textile printing, for example. If we want to keep resources in use, then We have to reuse treated wastewater. We have to foster industrial symbiosis in between different industries on closed loop, self-regenerating use, for example. If we want to regenerate ecosystems, we need to work on river restoration, ecological corridors, reducing plastic pollution. And this approach should be an opportunity for systemic innovation across Europe and beyond. And here I place a very much emphasis on systemic. Systems thinking means we must think holistically about municipal and industrial water networks, their registration, their digitalization, wrongful inflows, discharge regulation, citizen awareness, but we must not limit ourselves to the obvious, in our opinion. We need to think also about the water footprint of our food system, of our industry, in our family circle, the water that hides behind what we use every day, from bottled water and detergents to that t-shirt that only costs €1 at the shop. We must also drive projects and legal adjustments to, for instance, reuse treated water and develop biorefineries outside the wastewater treatment facilities to bring in new regenerative and less water-consuming materials, cascading approach to industrial production. In short, we cannot use these principles in order to add layers to already linear sectors. We need to transform those sectors in themselves. This is not a niche product. This is not something that we can place side by side of a traditional way of doing things. It must be a disruption. It must be a radical transformation. But we also must move beyond what can be covered by production and consumption into the territory itself and its climate change relations. To give you some insights into our work during the Portuguese presidency of the EU Council, we had a most successful German-led Water and Adaptation Conference in late 2020, and the release of the new EU Adaptation Strategy, Water Management and Climate Adaptation in it are consistently seen as a mutually interconnected, they are seen in a new way in that sense, requiring a new focus in the EU, both in the EU and at the national level. And indeed, water management, it was come to the conclusion that water management clearly needs to improve in the EU through increased investment in water use efficiency, in treatment, in reuse and recirculation solutions, all the stuff that I was talking about before, as well in restoring ecosystems and natural habitats. Climate change impacts, there was also a lot of discussion about this, including extreme weather events, are bound to happen more frequently and will only exacerbate the need to improve water management, especially given that water scarcity and even drought are projected to affect a growing number of member states in the future. And we have been already seeing instances of that in the recent past and today, actually. So this trio of EU presidencies, Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia, have collaborated in driving forward the need for this integrated approach, first with a policy paper on this subject, which you can access online very easily. And this policy paper has evolved during our presidency into entering the role of water into the EU climate adaptation and mitigation strategy. So water scarcity was even the main theme of our informal meeting of ministers in last April. It was a very fruitful conversation between the Commission and all member states. And there were some highlights that I already mentioned, but I can go through them again. So that droughts and water scarcity are no longer a problem just of Southern Europe countries. Around 20% of European territory and 30% of total population are yearly affected by water scarcity conditions, and these numbers are bound to grow. That was some of the observations that the European Environment Agency shared with us. It was certain that an holistic approach is needed to promote this, to promote adaptation, and that is the EU way, through the Green Deal, through all the initiatives. So water is seen very much as something that is transversal to all the operational plans that actually puts the Green Deal on the ground. And we can find instances of that holistic approach in pretty much every document that operationalizes the Green Deal. Water planning does indeed requires a very active engagement of key sectors, those that abstract, consume and discharge water, surface and groundwater, coordination between sectoral strategies, and there is a very much a large emphasis on agriculture, on energy, on transport, and the protection of water resources in sort of binding everything together, a key to a sustainable and resilient water management on the territories of the European Union. And also measures will be taken to respect the no harm principle. It was something that was discussed. And among others, there was discussion of protection of water resources, enhancing resilience, enhancing climate mitigation based on water aspects. In the last formal Council of Ministers, it was on the 10th of June, we have approved these Council conclusions on the EU adaptation strategy, and we have been able to focus and encapsulate the role of water management and the value of nature-based solutions woven into our conclusions, and we are looking forward of the next steps coming in. Finally, the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented challenge for everyone. Think of the millions of masks, think of all the packaging. I think the pollution spikes that once again we are seeing, as we say here, I think I've heard this somewhere else, but I usually use it because it's a very clear message of what we are up against. There is, in fact, no vaccine against climate collapse, no vaccine against biodiversity loss, against resource scarcity, against human environmental damage, against water pollution and water degradation. So moving forward and looking forward, we must be ambitious in looking, in doing, in moving, putting people's well-being at the center of decision-making, in distribution, regeneration, and value creation that addresses inequality, unemployment, and poverty. All of this has clear links with how well we manage our resources, including water. I think important steps have been done in the Porto Declaration. I think the move to transform the well-being principles of the European people at the center of policy decision is a welcomed move above the GDP as an economic imperative. We must make use of these policy instruments to shape the behavior of citizens, of industries, into establishing that level playing field that is still too tilted. So when we talk about carbon taxes, internalization of scarcity costs, levies on material waste, levies on taxing pollution, going after polluters, applying the polluter paying principle is very much important to achieve this. It is not enough to reward well behavior and leave bad behavior untouched. We need to tilt that scale. Policies are not created in a vacuum. It is important to discuss, to listen, to learn, to collaborate, to react. Governments must look beyond regulation. They must reach out, engage with all stakeholders, indoors and outdoors. The goal, and I finish as how I have begun, the goal, the vision of a more circular economy is also a vision of a more human economy, a more environmental economy that gives us an opportunity to build green bridges between us away from an economic development model that depletes rather than preserves and regenerates. We have to let those bridges be built without gray embankments. That should be our goal. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to share this view with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dos Santos. Listening to you, I hear three words coming back, which I would say, which we've heard all through this week, I think, which are very important, which is in order for us to address the water challenges, we need political will. And listening to you, I think that political will is clearly there. Yeah. It's also my own, I would say, conclusion in working with the European institutions, where I also see clearly that will to address the water challenge. The other one is equitable innovation. Innovation, I would say, of course, technological innovation, but also social innovation and innovation in the way we govern and we manage our water resources, also very important. And last one, I think, which is also very important, is collaboration along the water value chain across, I would say, different sectors and across different national, regional borders, all very important. So listening to you, I think your narrative really resonates very well with our ambition as Water Europe to achieve to break basically the paradigm and to build a European and global even water smart society. And we are looking forward to work with you, but also with the upcoming Slovenian presidency to make this all happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Then we pass on to the next item on the agenda, which is the award ceremony for the Water Europe Global Water Awards. And for that, I would like to ask Rasha Hassan from the European Junior Water Programme to take the floor and to announce the winner.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Spain. First of all, I'm thrilled to join you here to hand over the Global Water Challenges Award, which is given as a recognition for the innovative initiatives that have contributed to achieving the water-related sustainable development goals. I am Rasha Hassan, the program officer at H2O People and also a participant of the European Junior Water Programme. During this week, you got the opportunity to e-meeting the participants of EGWP2. Thus, if you would like to know more about this program, please visit EGWP booth at the virtual exhibition of Water Innovation Europe. Allow me to say thank you to the Water Europe team for this amazing virtual experience. On another note, I would like to draw your attention to the importance of engaging young water professionals at different levels and ensuring their participation in varied events, as many of the key speakers illustrated during this week. Together, we can make a change, and you can help us in building the future we are aiming for. Without further ado, I am honored to present the Global Water Challenges to KWR. Thus, I will give the floor to Professor Gertjan Medema, who will present a technology we can use to check the coronavirus circulation in our city's sewage. Sounds very interesting and relevant. Professor Medema, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hassan, and we are very thrilled and honored to receive this award. And the first thing we'd like to echo the words of the Honourable State Secretary of Portugal and also Dirk Krol about the collaboration, because that was the key success factor also here. Because mining wastewater for information for public health requires multiple cross-sectoral collaboration, and we were fortunate to have both very good players in the underground world, so the sewer networks like STOA and the water utilities and Partners for Urban Water, and also players in the public health sector, Erasmus University, a medical center, and municipal health services. We have been developing, looking at wastewater as mirror of society already for quite some time, particularly for illicit drugs and pharmaceuticals. But now this pandemic has shown us that wastewater is really a mirror of our society, also for in this pandemic situation, for what the coronavirus is doing in our cities. So we've listed the main added values that we see from why you would look into wastewater for this type of information, in addition to all the other ways that the public health sector is already looking for what this virus is doing. But we see the added value of wastewater as mirror is that it's objective, because everybody is going to the toilet and not everybody is getting tested or going to the testing streets. It provides an early warning. We've shown that, and many others have seen that since that you can have an early warning both of the emergence of the virus, but also currently of the emergence of new variants of concern in our cities, and all that by mining wastewater for information. And I think lastly, it's also very efficient, because you only need one sample to sample a whole population of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to see what the virus is doing in that population. As we said, it's not a replacement of traditional ways of health surveillance, but it's surely a very valuable addition to these ways. And I'm very pleased to see the very wide distribution of sewage surveillance now, and also the recommendation of the European Commission to the member states to go look in sewers for particularly for the emergence of the variants of concern. So again, from Frederik Been and myself, thank you very much. We are very honored to receive this award.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both of you. While listening to you, I made some nice, I think, associations. You refer to as wastewater as a mirror of our society. It made me think of Greek mythology, where I think clean and fresh water has probably been the first, I would say, mirror of human individuals in the form of Narcissus. So I think wastewater as a mirror for our society as a whole is a great improvement. Also from my side, congratulations with winning this important award. And of course, we will be helping you over the next year to spread the good news of this important solution. So thank you very much, and once more, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we pass on to the next award. Actually, it's about the Water Europe Honorary Membership 2020 and 2021. Unfortunately, last year, when we were about to prepare everything for the Honorary Award 2020, we were caught up by the Corona crisis, where we had in about 6 weeks transform what had been programmed as a physical event to turn it into a digital event. And well, we judged the context, a digital event would not do justice to the importance of the Water Europe Honorary Membership. Of course, it's also an inclusive process where we want the people who receive this, I would say, being present and being, I would say, I would say, surrounded by the warmth of our Water Europe community. We're still locked into this digital situation. Nevertheless, we've decided to continue with this, and I'm actually very happy that for this award, we will have also the presence of two other already appointed honorary members, Diane Darras and Theo van den Hove. And with that brief introduction, I would like to give the floor to Thomas Michel, who will announce the honorary member award for 2020-2021. Thomas, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I hope you can all hear me well. The person we are embodying with this honorary member award this year defines himself as a water expert with ample managerial and board experience. And that he certainly has. This person started out quite a long time ago, being active as director at UK WEIR. Then he has been vice chair and chair at the Global Water Research Coalition, also participating as a member in BSmart. He has been board member and treasurer for a long time at IWA. He has been vice chair of ACUO. And then at some point he decided that maybe you also have to make some money, and he became a managerial position in Wellington Associates. And last but not least, he has been for 2 years president of WSSTP, today Water Europe. So that's quite a career. That is, I think that's Waterman with stripes. Huh? This person is Mike Ferryman. Mike Ferryman, to me, has been my predecessor. He has been my master in the sense of magister. And he has clearly, for me, been an example. And I hope, and I believe, also a good friend, although we haven't been in touch for quite some time. As a true Brit, he has always been balanced and pragmatic, and I think that a good president should be. So, without further ado, I embody Mike with this honorary membership, and I'm glad that we are joined in this ceremony by Diane Darras and Theo van den Hoven, as Dirk already said. And Mike, if you want to say a couple words, congratulations, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Good. I didn't recognize myself. I've not been working for a few years now. I've forgotten all the things I did. But one thing I've done in the last few days, I looked at some past board papers. And in 2011, we had a meeting and we set ourselves a target. At the time, we had 65 members. And we set ourselves a target to grow to 100. And now from the website, I understand there's 235 members of Water Europe, and that's great. And maybe the board should set itself a target of 500 members. Be ambitious, go for it, because you heard from the minister from Portugal, there's a lot to be done. And sitting by watching and talking about it won't achieve it. And don't forget what Machiavelli said when you're taking on the challenge you've got. Nothing is more difficult to achieve than change, because people don't like change. There are too many vested interests. So keep at it. You will succeed. Think of all the things we've achieved in the last 50 years. In the 60s, the visible sign of pollution was detergents and foam on rivers. Well, we sorted that out by changing the chemistry. In the 80s, we invested in carbon and ozone to remove pesticides from drinking water. Now we've moved to a focus on systems and assets. But the challenge we've got is bigger than all the ones we had in the past. The challenge is climate change. And unless we can do something about that collectively with government support and EU support, I think you all know my feelings on the speed of movement of the EU. I won't repeat them. We've got to do things together, and we've got to start moving with pace. significant pace. I'm very honoured to have received this award. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best for the rest of your event. Thank you.
Very good, Mike. Also, congratulations from my side, and I hope next year we can actually have a physical edition of Water Innovation Europe again, and then all our honorary members are invited to attend for a special, I would say, a special session where we can bring everybody together. I think it would be
so be it.
Yes. Okay, good. So with that, we're going to move on. And as already mentioned, the next item on our agenda is the panel discussion on a water smart society for a global impact, which will be moderated by our board member and ever entertaining Richard Ellerman. Richard, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Dirk, and congratulations to Mike Farimund. And I agree very much with what he said. So the session that I've been asked to present is entitled A Water Smart EU for Global Impact. A lot of people today have already mentioned the COVID-19 crisis and the great work which, for example, KWR have done with regards to that. We all know that the principal challenge that we face at the moment is climate change. And in the blurb, as it were, for this session, Water Europe stated that Europe needs to secure its autonomy and strengthen its diplomacy in order to face new challenges. And how can we do that? How can the European water ecosystem contribute to building a global EU leadership beyond its water diplomacy? I would ask, can the EU, for example, be as effective as Cristiano Ronaldo, who is a talented football player, but with the mental capacity of a moribund Tyrannosaurus Rex, who in 5 seconds, unwittingly, did more for the value of water this week than most of us have done in our combined efforts together over a decade. Such is the global society we live in, my friends, where image is all too often more important than fact, where a 160-character tweet can be far more influential than a thoroughly documented, well-written 60-page thesis. That is our reality. Can the EU go beyond words and well-intentioned messages and convert global water knowledge, be it European or non-European, into true wide-scale awareness and action in order to answer the principal challenges that we presently face? Or will future generations still be waxing lyrical in numerous, endless conferences about what humans should have done but didn't during the first half of the 21st century? I am a man in search of answers. And to give me those answers today, we have 4 very eminent and very well qualified speakers, the first of whom is Johan Shah. Johan is an associate senior fellow with the CIPRI Peace and Development Program, as well as with Conflict and Peace Program. Johan is currently the chair of ALNAP, an international humanitarian network for learning and system improvement, and he's a member of the expert group for aid studies. He was recently in charge of Swedish aid to Palestine at the Swedish Consulate General in Jerusalem. He has worked at the World Resources Institute in Washington, D.C. He was the director of the International Commission on Climate Change and Development, launched by the Swedish government, and is a member of the IUCN Council. He has respectively within led departments for policy support, climate change and environment, and the humanitarian unit. And if that wasn't enough, he's also worked for the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, and the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan with field postings in Asia. Johan, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this kind and long introduction. You must be talking about somebody who's very old, who's done all these things. So I'd like to make a few comments on the fact that water is a shared resource, and also a few comments on what climate change means from that perspective. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Middle East and about Europe. Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge the fact that water does not move according to administrative borders. It moves according to the contours of landscapes. And this goes both for the surface and also for the subterranean landscape of aquifers. And this means that countries, a very large proportion of major waterways in the world are shared, and therefore countries need to agree on how to protect them, how to share them, how to manage them. If we look at the Middle East region, which obviously is a hot and dry region, water is a resource of existential nature, and we can see this in agriculture. We see there are many expressions of this in the religion of Islam and so on and so forth. And this region, every country shares at least one aquifer with its members, and some 60% of the rivers and lakes in the region are across an international border. But still, there are very few bilateral agreements on water sharing in the Middle East, and there are no basin agreements, no basin-wide agreements for their management and use. And I think that the sort of seminal example of this is the Euphrates and Tigris basins, which originate in Armenia and Turkey, and of course have life literally in Iraq and Syria depends on access to these waters, but there is no basin-wide agreement between the riparian states for this basin. So why is that? And I think it's not a very original suggestion to say that the nature of autocratic and authoritarian regimes in that region, which is the predominant sort of character of governance in that region, these kinds of states are not prepared to give strong mandates to intergovernmental organizations that can help develop and resolve the need for water sharing arrangements. And of course, the fact when I talk about the Euphrates and Tigris, the fact that we now also, since several years, are in a state of conflict in that sub-region makes it even more difficult to come to these kinds of agreements. So looking at Europe, Europe actually has the highest number of shared basins in the world. Some 75 river basins in Europe are shared. And we have, since the 80s and the 90s, we have the sort of gold standard of transboundary water governance in Europe. There's an EU Water Framework Directive, and the UN Economic Commission for Europe has also played a very important role in developing these kinds of frameworks. And in addition, there are also bilateral agreements between countries. But if you look closely at these agreements, they are mostly about protecting the quality of water. They are much less about the allocation of shared water. And looking at what we are now facing in terms of climate change impacts, which we know will lead to much more fluctuation in terms of precipitation, we will have probably more intense precipitation during winters and drier summers. So the issue of actual allocation of this resource will become much more important than it has been in Europe. And there's research telling us that we have a problem here because the frameworks we have for water governance are not designed to deal with this fact. And looking worldwide, it's pretty much the same. Many agreements on water sharing have assumed that this is a fairly stable and static resource. And in many instances, it's not been easy to negotiate these agreements. And now many of them have to be revisited and maybe even revised in the face of this much more extensive variability that we are facing in terms of climate change impacts. So I'd like to stop there, but just this is the sort of state of sort of what we are equipped with in terms of sharing this vital resource.
Thank you very much, Johan, for that very concise but very lucid introduction. I'd just like to remind all the people who are listening in that you will be able to ask questions. You can write them on the chat, and then I can read them out to the panelists once we've heard from everybody. The next member of our panel is somebody who I think that anybody who's connected to Water Europe will know well. Diane Daras, who has spent during her career 37 years working for Suez. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diane. She was the IWA president from 2016 to 2021. She was a founding member, as Dirk has already indicated, and also the first president of what was then called the Water Supply and Sanitation Technology Platform, known to you all now as Water Europe. And she was a member of the advisory group on the environment for the 7th Framework Programme of the European Research Directorate. I apologize for the church bells. That's not a reflection on Diane. That's just a reflection on the fact that I'm speaking from my village in northern Spain. She was a president, Diane was a president during 6 years of the Environmental Strategic Committee of the French Standards National Agency. And again, if that wasn't enough, she's also been a member during several years of the Environmental Advisory Committee of Singapore Research Agency, as well as the French Research Agency. Diane is a woman who I think in the water world is known almost to all and sundry, and is no less welcome for being so well known. Diane, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that long presentation. I think it's true that I have a long career, so of course I hope I was working a little bit. It's nice to be after Joanne. I think with my professional experience and being in IWA for a while, I would like to speak more on the small cycle. Joanne expressed the big cycle. How do we share the big cycle? I think there is a challenge, and I do agree that the challenge is big on how to share that cycle. I would like to represent more maybe industry and utilities which have in the day-to-day life to work with a smaller cycle. They take water out, they give it and they bring it back. And I think again, there are lots of challenge to look at. Of course, Europe can be happy of what technology has been done. European companies have developed high-level standard technology. They have lots of experience. And I think we can honestly consider that what has been developed can be exported and we can show. But we need to remind also that we have to show that we apply it. Because sometimes we develop technology, but we have difficulties to apply them in our own region. So for example, smart meters or things like that, we need to show good quality water or wastewater. We still have a lot to do. So we have technology, but probably sometimes we forget to apply it. And we need a strong policy in Europe in order that what we can do, we do it. So I think it is one of the maybe sometimes difficulty in Europe is to be able to finance or to apply what we have been able to develop in Europe. Dirk has said, and I think I would like to stress more on that innovation is not just technology, it's also on governance, policy, and I would like to add business models. Why business models? Because I think when we are in industry and utilities, of course we can speak about the governance of the utilities, but we need to have probably business model which have to be adapted now to the new scheme of Europe or to the climate change. And that, as it has been said by Mike, changing our business model is probably very difficult. So it's probably there where, on my opinion, Europe can show good experience, but Europe could learn also of what has been developed abroad. And I take my IWA and international hat for that. It's very difficult for a utility to do what the utility should do. If the utility and the city want to be a water-wise utility, they should try to push consumer to consume less water. They should take care more on their leaks. They should do all that. But sometimes it's taking care of leaks, going from a good level of leaks or a few level of leaks, something like having 80% of only 20% of leaks, it costs a lot. So the utility sometimes does not really do things because it's costly. And of course, as water is raw water is still most of time at no cost. How can you be pushed to look better to your water if there is not the economical value in the raw water? Again, pushing your consumer and user to reduce your consumption is not at all in the mind of the utilities, not because they are naughty, it's just because they have to be sustainable on the economical point of view. So if they reduce their revenue, maybe they would have some difficulties to invest. So how do you manage pushing people to reduce the consumption, probably while you have to increase the cost of the water because you need to maintain your revenues? At least maybe you can reduce a little bit if you have less energy consumption because the consumption of water is decreasing. But you need to find a way to increase probably prices in order to have that vision that water has a cost. And water has a global cost, rather not just the economical cost. And then we need to change the business model. And changing business model, of course, you can expect utility to be so good that they are able to do. But in IWA, we consider that regulators can really be helpful on that. And there is a good example in Europe, for example, in Italy, where the regulator, the water regulator, started to put some key parameters on leaks, and with incentive for the utility. And they are thinking, I don't think they applied it yet, but they were thinking on why don't we have two prices? A price for the water up, for example, to 50 liters per day per person at a social price and not too expensive, and then increase the price of water over that in order to have incentive to people to take care of water. And I think that kind of move is absolutely necessary. We have in Europe some people thinking about that. There is in Lisbon a school for governance and utilities. So there are some places in Europe where we can work on that, and the network of regulator can be helpful. But we have also very good example abroad, like Singapore, which has been for political and very strong reason lacking water in the country. So they've been able to develop a policy around the water. And you find also, for example, the city of Perth in Australia, they were not able to develop, there was a risk for distributing water. So they decide that they invest in a policy where the consumer can reduce and is pushed to reduce his consumption. And in a certain way, it helped them not to build the third desalination plant. So we need to find a way in Europe now to have better governance and develop the governance around the water, the economical governance at the small water cycle, and of course, as Johan said, probably even the economical governance at the bigger cycle, because it's two different regulation, and we should not mix the smaller regulation, the local side, and the bigger one at the basin side. And if we don't do that, we won't be able to develop a circular economy. How can you develop reuse or reduce all that policy if you don't have the economical architecture, as it has been stressed by Mrs. Dos Santos? We need to change the global architecture of economy in order to stay on the right path for Europe. So I think there are two points. Technology, it has been developed and we have to apply it, but the governance, the economical way of working, the regulation is still a big challenge for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. The next member of the panel is Sébastien Solé. Sebastian is the head of energy and environment transition at BNP Paribas. Sebastian Saleh has over 17 years of experience in sustainable development, ecological and energy transition, energy and climate policies, renewable energy, industrial environment, quantification of environmental and social impacts, and analysis of the life cycle, the LCA. He has worked on sustainable marketing, economic instruments to fight against pollution and societal development. Before joining BNP, he was working at Ineris as an environmental economist for 4 years, and then he was working in different branches of the Total Group for 9 years and at Droit Development. I'm impressed by all of the CVs of all of the panelists today. Sebastian, welcome very much to you, and over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Good morning, everybody. So, yes, I think that outside this conference, so for lay people, financing the water sector may seem cheap and easy. Cheap because, okay, most people consider that water as a common good should be cheap, and easy because transporting water in pipelines for the man of the street, it seems quite easy. But we clearly know in this conference that it's not true, and that financing water infrastructure is neither cheap nor easy. We know that we will need huge investment in water infrastructure in Europe as in the rest of the world in the next years and decades to upgrade the existing infrastructure and to make sure that water scarcity is dealt with and that the pollution is kept at a reasonable level. So, in other words, we need huge investment to limit leakage and optimize demand, to upgrade in infrastructure, to be able to reuse water as much as possible, especially in the south of Europe, to adapt to climate change and to the growing population, to comply with the most relevant pollution standards. And Diane just said that it was important to implement technologies such as smart meters and these kind of things. And obviously, we need investment and financing for all this. And so, clearly, it was what Dirk said in his introduction. We need innovation in many things, and we need innovation in finance as well. And so more and more financial institutions have to develop new means, new ways to finance these huge investments that we will need, that we need now, and that we need in the near future. So for this, we can do several things. And as BNP Paribas, we have already developed several things to find new innovative ways to finance water infrastructure. So firstly, more and more, we develop innovative financial products and services to finance green investment, blue investments. So more or less, we add quite a wide range of financial products, and we are developing for each of these products a green, or I should say blue version of this product. For instance, the first big instance is a green and blue bond. Emitting bond is for a country or a company a traditional way to finance what it wants, investments or whatever. And more, the green bond market or the blue bond market is developing at quite an incredible rate to finance only sustainable investment. I will give you only one example, but quite recently, BNP Paribas launched with the Bank of China a big blue bond for more or less $500 million that will be used by China to invest and to develop new sustainable capacity related to water. So this kind of new product is quite expected by investors who like more and more investing in sustainable projects. So first thing, we can develop blue bonds. Second thing, another financial product that is more and more popular among investors is the SLL, sustainability linked loans. So it's a traditional loan to a company, but we attach to this loan sustainability related KPI and targets. So we discuss with the company before granting the loan, and we set together a target related to sustainability. So it can be related to decrease of greenhouse gas emission, but it can be as well related to water targets. So decreasing the leaks, increasing the quality of wastewater for an industrial company, and this kind of thing. And if the company which is this sustainability target, the weight of the loan is decreased. So the loan is cheaper for the company. And with the market of the SLL is growing incredibly fast. And when it comes to water, we have concluded, for instance, SLL for Thames Water in the UK a few years ago. And we have concluded another such loan for Aquafin, so Belgium public utility. So more and more companies are eager to develop this kind of loans embedded, in which we embed sustainability targets. We develop as well export finance for sustainable assets. Recently, we developed such kind of export finance facility for Vietnam for wastewater collection and treatment unit. And we try more and more and convince investors into investing in sustainable projects, sustainable funds. And we launched quite a few years ago a fund dedicated to water, so BNP Paribas Aqua, which is dedicated to investment in sustainable water projects and companies. So clearly, we try more and more and innovate in financial products related to water, but we cannot do it alone because all the projects I've just mentioned, we have done it with our clients. So it can be a public companies, public utilities company, it can be states, it can be governments, whatever. But really, we have to develop these new ways of financing with companies, with public authorities, and we invest with investors. So it's really a collaborative action that is really needed. But that was the first step, because all these projects are economically viable under current conditions. So it's the easiest to finance. But for some projects related to water, economic conditions are not available yet to make it economically viable. So we need to develop more and more what we call blended finance. That is a mix of private and public finance. So public finance being there to de-risk the project, to make possible the emergence of an economically viable project. And once the project is economically viable, we can, BNP Paribas, we can attract private investors so that they invest in the project. One good example for it is a fund we have launched a few months ago, Wind Fund for Coral Reef. So it's a fund that we launched with several UN agencies, with several private philanthropy foundations and several countries. And so with this fund, we have a target of $500 million. We will gather both public money, philanthropy money, and private money to invest in projects related to the preservation of coral reefs, and we hope that it will be quite successful. So clearly, we have huge investments ahead of us in water infrastructures, and financial institutions are trying more and more to develop innovative products, innovative ways of financing this to make sure that its investment will be high enough in this very challenging and very required projects. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. And now for the last, but certainly by no means the least of our four panelists. It's a pleasure to introduce, and I do hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Tanya Mishkova. Tanya is a diplomat. She has been increasingly working recently on water diplomacy and circular economy, which in her own words are two topics that she's absolutely passionate about. She has spent more than 24 years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, where she has dealt with the Middle East, especially the Israeli-Arab conflict. She served as deputy head of the mission at the Embassy of Slovenia in Israel, and then she worked as diplomatic advisor to the President of Slovenia, Dr. Danilo Tork. After returning to the ministry, she was the national coordinator for the Union of the Mediterranean. She has served as ambassador to Egypt, and also as the non-resident ambassador to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. She has held the position of the head of department for emerging threats and challenges at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, and of acting Director General for Multilateral Affairs, Development Cooperation, and International Law. So I can think of no one better qualified to discuss especially the aspects of water diplomacy. Tanya, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. The Portuguese State Secretary made a good introduction about how EU is engaging in a comprehensive and integrated approach to water within the EU. And I would like to talk to you about how Slovenia, during its upcoming presidency of the EU, is going to try to apply this approach to EU's external action. So we would like to achieve a unified position of the EU 27 around this comprehensive approach, which means that we want to mainstream water across the three pillars: development, humanitarian, and peace, and at the same time highlight water as an issue in its own right. And this should be supported by a strengthened EU water diplomacy that works hand in hand with EU climate and energy diplomacy. We believe there is ample space and need for this EU water diplomacy to play a stronger role in promoting sustainable, inclusive water management and transboundary cooperation, in mediating and helping to prevent water-related conflicts, as well as contributing to post-conflict resilience by assuring that water is taken into consideration, for example, in peace agreements. Based on our strong experience in transboundary water cooperation as a vehicle for peace, we will be promoting the notion of water as a regional public good and as a factor of regional integration. And EU's regional programming is a great tool to support that. What will be our approach? We see it as comprehensive, inclusive, multi-stakeholder, cross-sectoral, multidisciplinary approach to water that is gender sensitive, as the only one that is well-informed, sustainable, avoids negative externalities, and enjoys the legitimacy of all stakeholders. We would like to support well-coordinated cross-sectoral water resources management and stronger governance of water systems based on an ecosystem approach, supported by data, supported by innovation, which benefits ecosystem services and includes circular economy principles. We're strong believers in circular economy. So if we want to achieve this integrated, well-informed, and contextualized approach, we need to look at water from the perspective of different nexuses: water, food, health, water, energy, food, water, climate, water, and peace. For example, we would like that EU, let's say, water interventions are conflict-proof and peace interventions are waterproof, to characterize a bit. So to better understand, to help better understand these interlinkages and develop a systems approach, we need partnerships. We need to be inclusive. We need to work, for example, with the European water ecosystem. I think particularly in science research and innovation and in capacity building. Interdisciplinary science, data sharing is something we deem important. Citizen science, taking on board citizen science, traditional knowledge, and of course, promoting innovation, not just technical, but societal, and particularly in governance, because we know that most water-related issues boil down to governance issues. As I said, capacity building, we believe it needs to be part of development projects. It's a very important part of development projects, not just in terms of how to run a project, but also how to negotiate with the banks or or other financiers, how to develop a project, how to collect and manage data. And this capacity building must be multidisciplinary, and it must include skills. We hear from our partners that, skills like problem solving and critical thinking. And the COVID pandemic brought forward the great opportunity to conduct this capacity building also online. And here again, as I said, I see the role of the European water ecosystems and I'm sure many of the attendees are already engaged in this. And finally, the pandemic also exposed and of course exacerbated inequalities. It showed that we need to get back to human development. So we would like to see the EU collectively maximize the impact of our aid in the area of human development. So by ensuring that WASH services are integrated in all health, nutrition, education, disability, gender equality programs and strategies, with water sanitation and hygiene targets and indicators included. And we will actually kick off our presidency with a high-level event in July on health and water for all as a priority of the new EU-Africa partnership. And to conclude, the new EU program and cycle, including the Team Europe initiative, is a good opportunity to underwrite this comprehensive approach to water. So let me stop here and back to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. We're now going to open the session to questions. I say again that if you want to ask a question, here I have the chat on my right, so that if you wish to ask one of the panelists or all the panelists a question, please write down your question there. This is my chance to act as the devil's advocate. As both a politician and as a political analyst, I have spent the last 2 or 3 years especially looking at the consequences of climate change and health on the domino effect on migration, armed conflict, and gender inequality, using the Mediterranean as an example. And I am, by nature, as Dirk would say, an entertaining optimist normally, but over the last 3 years, I have certainly become far more of a pessimist about the future and about very often both the governmental and the socially oriented corporate capacity to answer those challenges. So let me throw out a couple of questions to you. Johan, I will ask you to intervene first, but please, all 4 of you, feel free to butt in on each other as much as you want. There's nothing like a good discussion to really produce some answers. So my first question is that if water indeed is to be a source of diplomacy rather than a perpetual source of conflict, is it time that at an international level that we begin to recognize that the water as the principal source of life is a human right and therefore eventually must be taken out of corporate hands and placed into the hands of international agencies? Johan, I open that to you first.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for this intriguing question. And I think we all agree clearly that water should be seen as a human right, and I think we can see it incorporated in the catalog of human rights. But I think we need to be realistic in terms of what is the international community and domestic communities prepared to accept in sort of relinquishing or delegating authority and responsibilities to other and upper levels. I think most of all we need to see this as a domestic resource that needs to be managed in the most judicious and responsible way possible, and at the same time a shared resource that we have to agree, where we have to agree principles with neighboring states. I think we can also make the observation there was a lot of I would say hype of some decades ago about the risk of water wars. And it was feared that increasing competition for water resources would actually lead to open conflict between states. That has not happened. I think instead we have realized that states have managed to acknowledge that they have shared and joint interests, and they need to cooperate around these shared resources. And I think we can even say perhaps that negotiating agreements on sharing of natural resources is actually one of the most effective peace-building instruments that we have. And if we manage to develop such instruments for shared resource, that in itself, there's a sort of virtuous circle in terms of also building the institutions that are necessary for managing these shared resources. So I think that there's a lot to speak, and I think Tanya's emphasis on the need for water diplomacy, I think, is a very important one. And I'm glad that Slovenia has seized this as a priority for its presidency of the EU. And I think there's a lot to be done in that respect, and really realize the sort of implications of actually coming to agreements on how to use this resource, which is a right for everybody.
Sorry, I was silenced. Diane. Diane, if you can put your mic on. We still can't hear you, Diane.
That's okay, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to come back on the human rights to water. I think I agree perfectly that it is a right, but I would like to share the fact that when you have a right, you need to understand what it means. Because there are lots of right to circulate, right to have your own political opinions, and then you discover that each country has a way of understanding what it means. So it's the same for the water right. I think what has been developed is very good, that it is individuals have a water right, which means that they should receive water at reasonable price, not for free, and they should have it. And it's of course a right which has to be developed by the governments and the cities, and sometimes they forget it, but so that's fine. What could be also said is, I don't know if there is a right for countries, because at the level of the Basin Agency, what does it mean to have the right to water for a country? And of course, there are some discussion on borders, and probably it should be developed to understand what it means, what kind of right, volume, quality, part of the fact. So it needs a development of understanding, and understanding who has to apply it. Is it at the international level? Is it at the local level? In the case of right to water for people, it's at the local level, which with the right has to be taken. So I think it's interesting, but it's a very big topic, and you have to develop it and develop the knowledge and explain it, because otherwise people understand that having a right means whatever. And it's the same in other rights. You are free to do things if you don't bother the others. You are free to express you if you don't aggress the others. So I think in the right of water is the same. It has to be developed. What does it mean? And what are around it, which is important.
May I ask, and I'll pass this to Tanya, I can see that your hand's raised as well. But may I ask, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, which is a hobby that I have. Often the corporate and the utility discourse about tariffs, and despite the right that tariffs are important, etc., dissuade, Is that not a reflection of our failure as a society to communicate the importance of water to the general public? Would it not be better if we spent more time educating everybody on the vital importance of water rather than looking at the simple solution of just charging them more to dissuade them to use it?
I think it's the same. I mean, you need to share it. And in the water-wise vision of which has been developed by IWA, one of the big part of it, of the principle, is to share it with the community, to have some expression, to discuss it. And it's part, of course, I mean, the price is a part of it, but of course, it's not all. The value of water, which is different from the price, you can have, and that means expressing why it is important. But again, it has to be looked, on my opinion, at the local level, because the value of water can be, as it has been said, very important in some part. A bottle of water could be considered as a great value, when in other countries, in Canada and Argentina, maybe it's different. So it's really a shared vision. And of course, it's why the vision of the global resources of basin agency is important, because then you can share the vision on how important is the water in your part, in your city, and the water-wise city vision is an interesting document, which is 4-page, which express a bit that vision on how do you share with the community also the vision on the water. Yeah.
Okay, Tanya, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, I think they uncovered most of what I wanted to say. But, you know, one point, we definitely don't see water as a commodity. And we think to look at water as a national treasure is also a wrong point of departure. And what needs to be done, you know, is of course change of narratives. And this needs to happen in most countries, and especially in countries where we have this kind of narrative that prevents cooperation across borders, and of course prevents also inclusive management of water resources, and also prevents equitable sharing of water resources. So changing of narratives is, and I think you touched upon this. This is extremely important, how we value water. Yes.
Sebastian. Sebastian?
Yes. Not much to add. Yes, I think for economic and financial perspective, I think it's very important to share as much as possible all the information on the challenges we have with citizens, consumers, because for the time being, consumers are not keen on spending more on water, because as I said earlier, they consider that dealing with water should be cheap and easy, which is not the case. So there is really a question of disclosure, of communication, of awareness, to make people aware that yes, we need water infrastructure need huge investment, and they have to understand why. It's not only to make more money for big companies. It's because it's really needed concretely. So yes, there is a real question of disclosures and raising awareness among general public, and I think it's one of the biggest challenge for the year to come.
I certainly welcome, thank you, Sebastian. And I certainly welcome the comments, the original comments of Tanya when she was describing the Slovenian approach towards development and putting an emphasis on human development, and also the pillar of peace, which water is absolutely essential, and I think hasn't been recognized until now within diplomacy as a whole, except in very specific regions. And I know that both Johan and Tanya have a lot of experience in the MENA region, as I do myself, working between, for example, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, as I have done for over many years. So I do understand that. I think it was extremely important as well, Tanya, that you mentioned co-creation and cross-sectoral work between, for example, you mentioned the WEFE nexus, the water, energy, food ecosystem nexus. which indeed perhaps the water sector itself has been, shall we say, politely hermetic to the idea very often. In fact, the water sector as a whole has often been described by people such as myself as being far too capable of avoiding dialogue, shall we say, with other sectors. Maybe I'm being unfair, but I'm an unfair person. We do have a couple of questions which kind of lead on from what I'm saying there. There was a question, and I'm sorry I can't see your names in full, but somebody did ask, what do the panelists see as the biggest hurdle to overcome in order to successfully build a water-smart European society? Technology, finance, or cultural mindset? Which I think we have touched on a little bit, but Diane, perhaps you could answer that question first. What of those three elements, and I would add a couple of others as well, but of those three elements, what in your opinion is the most important hurdle that we need to overcome?
Culture, clearly. I think we have technology, we have the economy, honestly, Europe is not, but we need to change the culture. And I would give a very simple example. I still don't understand why we bill water on cubic meter. Most of people have no idea what is a cubic meter. If we were billing that on kilos, we said, oh, we are going to, then people understand first that each kilo is not so expensive, but they can see what they have. Because you understand perfectly what is a kilo of water to drink it. It's a bottle. I mean, one bottle, 1 liter is fine. But then you don't understand you shower, you don't understand the water you take for irrigation, you don't understand that. And I think culture goes by very simple metrics and very simple example. And I remember that in big discussion in Europe, they were expressing how much water you have per year per person. And they were in kilometer cube and things like that and per year. I said, well, I'm sorry, I have no idea of what is a kilometer cube. And I said, I'm going back to cubic meter because I still see what is a cubic meter. And then you discover that water stress is under 4 cubic meter per day per person. 4 tons of water per day per person, which is a huge amount. So I think if you want to change the culture, we need first that people understand what it means. And you can touch a kilo. You don't touch a tons. I mean, you're happy not to receive a tons on my head. So, and I think by changing small things like that, you can start to have a real discussion on what is the value of your kilo of water when you avoid to buy a drinking bottle or a bottle or plastic bottle and things like that. But what does it mean in case of shower? How do you manage that? Because then you have lots, you have 100 and things like that. So culture, sure, I do believe culture. So we need maybe by teaching to kids, I see that the kids are extremely interesting because they understand much better and they bring it back home. So it's a question of generation. We know that we invest for 30 years. By teaching to kids what is water, probably we could change the mentality of Europe. And we have, fortunately, good schools, good education, so we can do that in Europe. Yeah.
Certainly the education and indeed nursery or primary school level is very important. And as a politician myself, I've discovered at a local level very often that is the best communication method to get through to the parents and to their relations and what have you, undoubtedly. Johan, can I ask you your view on that? What do you think is the most important hurdle? Technology, finance, or culture?
No, I agree. I think with Diane, I think culture and the understanding of what this vital resource actually is. And I think the greatest problem we find in countries that actually subsidize water, and again, we can go to the Middle East. There are many countries in the Middle East who do subsidize water. So there's no narrative, that sort of calls on people to save on water, to be judicious in how they use it, and so on. And the problem then comes that often these subsidies, they often come along with subsidies, with food subsidies and energy subsidies and so on. So you have a whole package of subsidies which form part of a social contract as people understand it. And to start to change that, you have to simultaneously ensure that those who are most vulnerable, the poorest sections of the population, are simultaneously targeted with social protection measures to compensate for the increasing costs of food, energy, water, etc. So it is once you've sort of gone the wrong way, it's extremely difficult to reverse that road and change the mentality and the perspective of people. So yes, culture, the narrative, the story about water clearly is key.
Sebastian, you were describing many of the measures that you yourself have been involved in with regards to, shall we say, a more ethical form of financing in order to shall we say, encourage a more sustainable approach to procedures. To what extent do you think that ethical financing can be effective in order to influence not only corporate opinion, but also general public opinion regarding water?
Good question. So yes, I fully agree that the main hurdle, I fully agree with Johan and Diane, that the main hurdle is the future. And can, yes, these financial tools have an effect? And honestly, I'm not sure, because clearly it will have, it does already have a huge impact on corporates. So one of the most interesting things for these tools, in addition to the financial incentives that it can provide with companies investing in green and blue projects, is that when a company issues a blue bond, when a company concludes SLL with the targets related to water, it gets compulsory for the chief financial officer of the company to integrate these sustainability issues into his mindset. And it's quite revolutionary, because a few years ago, 2 years ago, talking of water, talking of sustainability, it was completely out of the scope of 99% of chief financial officers. And so with these new tools, the chief financial officers have to take this consideration, these topics into consideration, and it's a complete change of mindset within the companies. So clearly, these tools can have a deep impact on the mindset of companies. For the, yes, the general citizens, yes, SLLs, green bonds, it's still quite far away from them, and it's quite normal. So I'm not really sure that what kind of an impact is we develop more and more green savings. So we propose to retail clients new ways to invest their savings, their personal savings, into green projects. So it's more or less the beginning of it, but in this kind of things, maybe it could have, yes, an impact on the awareness of citizens. But for the time being, it's mostly for corporates and yes, people within companies.
All right, now I'm getting a number of questions, some interesting comments as well from somebody who's called Peter, and he's talking about the attitude with countries which, for example, lack water resources, that lack large supplies. I would like to slightly adjust his question and ask you how important it is that, for example, people in water, shall we say, relatively wealthy water countries, their awareness. I mean, for example, something, again, that I've noticed through practical experience is that when you turn the tap on and the water comes out, for people, water is not an issue as long as the water is coming out. It was my pleasure to oversee a city during a time of a drought for 2 years between 2007 and 2009, when water wasn't coming necessarily out of the tap, and then suddenly it became a big issue. But as soon as the situation had been, shall we say, resolved, again, water disappeared into the background. How important is it for people in areas where there is a lot of water to understand the water footprint, to understand the fact that the clothes they wear, the materials they use, virtually everything which we touch has a very high water content and will be affecting the supply of water in another part of the globe? How impossible is it, and I'm asking, to convince human beings to be interested in something which does not affect their own personal day-to-day life? Tanya.
Yes, I think that, you know, with some public campaigning, this is something, I mean, that's been going on. It's not something new, that especially the young people who are, I would say, very much aware and involved in campaigns regarding climate change, they do point out, and they know that most of their water footprint comes, you know, it's imported water. The clothes they're wearing, I mean, everything they're using in daily life, you know, was probably produced somewhere else using somebody else's water resources. So I think, especially among the young, this awareness is there or is raising. We need to work more with the rest of the population, but it really depends. For example, in my country, we are water rich. Really, we've never had issues with you know, with water scarcity. However, the public is extremely sensitive to water issues. We recently put right to water into our constitution, and in a couple of weeks we will have a referendum on the new legislation on water, because the public is very sensitive to any change that, you know, revolves around legislation on water. So I don't know where this, you know, strong awareness on the importance of water comes from, but this is really part of our DNA. And it's probably something that we are raised with through our education system. I'm not sure, as I said, but obviously it can be done, and I'm optimistic about that.
Now then, Tanya mentioned in her introduction, again, I repeat, that she was talking about co-creation and citizen engagement. And I've always been a very strong advocate of the fact that citizen engagement actually means their active involvement, not in only the creation of the initiative or the policy or the action, but also in the implementation. I would go so far as to make them the overseers of the continuity of that action to the end, and I would make them the spokespeople to the community. Am I being a simple-minded idealist when I'm stating that? Or Diane and Sebastian, would the water sector, would the utilities themselves be prepared to always include the end user as well? In fact, the quadruple helix, the social quadruple helix of both the public sector, private sector, citizens, and indeed the ecosystem, representatives of the ecosystem itself, in the open co-creation and implementation of necessary measures, not just in Europe, but also beyond Europe. How open are the industrial water interests to that? Diane.
I think first, the industrial and the utilities are changing a little bit, and they are more and more introducing the capability of end user or small representative in their corporate governance. You see that in England. You started to see that in some countries where you have you develop a local company, and then they consider that you could ask to the end user their situation. I think in the regulator of UK regulator is taking in account in this policy and try to push the end user. I do believe that you can do that at the local level. If you want to develop a strategy, if you want to introduce, I do believe it can be, because you ask people a bit if they prefer to that kind of tarification. For example, you can have lots of different tariffs. You can have increasing price, reducing price, you can imagine or things, or you can have what we see now. Challenge is to not to have a low price, but to have a kind of check money given to people who have not enough money in order to pay their water. It's a kind of water check to pay their bill, which means that the price is the same for everybody, but you are help for when you have a family with lots of kids and no means. So I do believe that you can find. Where I find it more difficult is that they take care, and I would say that a bit dangerous, that they take care of the strategy of all the countries, because then it's become very, in my opinion, it's very far away. Where, again, coming back to my example in liter or cubic meter, I do believe that some people would like to do something, but they have no idea of what they speak about. So one of the risks is they suddenly decide that they shut the tap when they brush their teeth in order to help people who have no water around the world, which have no impact. And by the way, afterward, they take a long shower, where they spend a lot of water, but more than that, a lot of energy. Because when you have a long shower, not only you use water, but even you use lots of energy. So you have a strong climate impact by long shower. So how do you develop the understanding of what do we mean? I'm sure that if people started to understand how much water they consume, the day they understand that there is only maybe 10 liters per day per person in Haiti, they would understand that they spend not 10, they spend 100 liters per day, but nobody is giving the right figures. So you mislead. You need to have an order of magnitude. Everybody understands now when you listen to media that, and you see people around the world earning sometimes $10 a day, you say, how can they live? And you understand, because $10, you see what it is, and you understand how much you earn. But in water, people don't have the order of magnitude. And I don't think you can do something if people don't have any, can't touch the order of magnitude. So we need to really give that to people. Otherwise, I think it would be a bit magic and so, yeah, dangerous. Yeah.
We're coming to the last 2 minutes of the session, and Dirk would probably kill me if I went over time. Let me just ask you one more question to all of you. I am, generally speaking, an eternal optimist. I have to be. I, for example, think that one day I will still need to go to a barber's and ask them to cut my fringe. I still think that that's going to be possible one day. And yet, with regards to the global situation regarding not just water, but all of the effects of climate change, I tend to be a pessimist. And I tend to become frustrated when I hear the same speeches over many, many years and yet don't see very often tangible action. Johan, am I mistaken? Should I be an optimist, or am I right? Should I be a pessimist?
That's really big questions you're asking us to respond to, of an existential nature. I think this is partly. I don't think you are a pessimist in your actions. I think we can need to look at what Gramsci was saying. You know, the pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. We know that there are things that needs to be done and can be done, and we need to stay. It's, you know, addressing them. The situation is pretty bleak, I agree, but there's no one else who can resolve this but us.
Tanya.
Well, Johan has said it really well. You know, as a diplomat, I have to be optimistic. It's a professional default, but it's given the you know, the challenges, you know, like in transboundary water, we need ninefold progress if we want to reach the goals by 2030. That's something that's very difficult to achieve, obviously, but we need the effort still. You know, we can't just lay back and say, okay, it can't be done, you know, let's forget about it. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have so many tools at our disposal. We just need the political will to implement the tools that we have.
Sebastian?
I think that on the corporate side, we're really at the tipping point. That is, most companies, at least in Europe, become really aware of the climate change challenge in Paris for the COP21 in 2015. So they became aware of the challenge. They became aware that they had to, as companies, they had to do some things. And now they are taking commitments and they are really implementing the changes within their company. So we are really, I am convinced, at in the beginning of a phase of acceleration. But so for the time being, it's too early to tell whether this acceleration will be fast enough, because there are many things, many changes in the companies that are not visible yet, because taking BNP Paribas, we have 200,000 employees, so it takes a lot of time to make all these people change. So it's a beginning of a phase of acceleration. We hope that this acceleration will be fast enough, but yes, globally, we don't know yet. So we'll have to see in 2 to 3 years whether companies have really grasped the task ahead of them. I hope so. I'm a bit of an optimist as well, but yes, it's not sure yet. So we have to work on this acceleration.
And Diane, in 2 words, because otherwise Dirk will probably prohibit me from any other Water Europe event in the next 20 years. Your opinion?
It's like for the gender fight. I don't trust in my generation, but I trust in the next one, and even more in my grandchildren's generation. It will take generation.
I think that that's a very, very beautiful message to end on. I trust that all of us will maintain that will to change things. I also wish all of you the very, very best of luck in your future endeavors. And thanks and very, very much for your participation in this panel. And it's my pleasure to hand back to Dirk. Dirk.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for moderating this panel. And if you allow me, I would also like to answer to your last question, of course. And from my side, I would say, as I do not yet have your level of maturity and your wealth of experience, I remain an optimist. So I think once again, today, I think we've seen the importance of political will, and I would say the importance of innovation. And I would almost say 360 degrees innovation, because it's clear that that is what we need. It's not only, we've heard today, it's not only about technological innovation. It's not only about governance or innovation. It's not about financial innovation. It's not even only about innovation of business models. It's also about cultural innovation. And I think that is a huge challenge. Yeah. And as Diane says, probably therefore we need a generation to achieve that. Then the last part, so political will, innovation, and of course the last item is again collaboration. Collaboration across, I would say, all the borders you can imagine, which I think is really key here, and especially in the context of today, where we're speaking about achieving a water smart society in a global context. You've already touched upon the issue of co-creation. I think that is really an essential element here. Also within our Water Europe strategy, to really change things on the ground, we have come up with the concept of water-oriented living labs, yeah, to really create an environment of co-creation within Europe. But we've also said we also want to, I would say, build relationships inside Europe and outside Europe, yeah, in the context of water-oriented living labs, setting up twinnings. And so I think there is also a great link to also the agenda of the Slovenian presidency, and we hope to be able to contribute as much as possible to the ambitions of the Slovenian presidency there. With this, I would like to, and I'm very sad to say, we have to conclude almost the 2021 edition of Water Innovation Europe. This afternoon, for the members present, we will at 3 o'clock we will continue with the annual General Assembly. But before that, I would like to pass the word back to Hans Goossens for some final remarks before we formally close Water Innovation Europe 2020. Once again, thank you for all for participating, contributing, and listening in. and we all look forward to work with you over the next 12 months to achieve a water smart society. Thank you all, and Hans, please take the floor.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you all for your participation to this morning program, but also to the rest of the program earlier this week. I would definitely also like to thank Dirk and the full team behind the scene for preparing this week with a very intense and interesting agenda. And as we introduced the session, we believe an agenda which is even more to the point and to the highest attention of everyone, policymakers as well as citizens, to build a water smart European society, and also to, let's say, make sure that our companies, our technology institutions, our research institutions, that their insights, that their inventions, that their technologies can not only contribute to make this water smart European society, but that it can also contribute to make Europe, again, I would say, the leader on the globe for shaping a better future, a greener future. European Green Deal has definitely set the ambition for Europe. And I think it's a pleasure. I would even say I feel it as an honor to work in an environment where we can contribute truly to a better and smarter water management. And we know water is life, sanitation is dignity. So our mission is more valuable and more relevant than ever before. By this, I would thank you all again for having joined us. It is always an inspiration to have that many participants as we see. I'm not sure, Dirk, probably this was one of the last sessions where we were forced to go full digital. We will see what future will bring. Maybe future is hybrid or whatever it will look like. But I can say from my part, I look really forward to meeting you in the future in physical, having the possibility to have a chat over a glass or a snap. And I would say thank you all, and enjoy your lunch because we are close to lunchtime by now. In some countries, talking about cultural adaptation, in some countries, I think lunch is almost over yet. Thank you. Dirk, your micro is off.
Yeah, I said thank you all, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.